If you look at dating app data, sometimes people exaggerate this effect a little bit, right? But there is a tendency for basically very attractive men, high status men, the Hugh Hefners, right, to do really well on dating apps, to get a lot of attention from a lot of women, and then for the bottom chunk of men in terms of attractiveness to get none, to just get no matches whatsoever. And this is a tendency, it's called hypergamy, female hypergamy, that women will tend to want to marry up socially. So they'll want to marry a man who is richer than them, better educated than them, more successful than them, etc. This is basically what you see when people are left to their own devices on dating apps, and you can monitor it carefully. That is basically what people do. And the problem you end up with is that when you don't have a system of monogamous marriage and you don't have the expectation that people wait, there's really nothing stopping those men from just having loads of girlfriends, maybe having them at the same time, like having little harems, right? You know, not calling them that, but basically playing the field and not being forced to commit because like no one expects them to really. And it's like good fun for those men. It's frustrating for the women because they're having relationships with these men in the hope that it will turn into commitment, and then it never does. And so they end up feeling really bitter, right? And it's also frustrating for the less attractive men who are getting no attention whatsoever and who read me or listen to me saying the sexual revolution was good for men. And it's like, it wasn't good for me. It's like, I know. There's like an inbuilt inequality.
Sorry to interrupt, but hasn't there always been an inbuilt inequality in the male experience?
Well, this is what's interesting about the monogamy-polygamy system, right? In a monogamous system, to some extent, that's prevented because these high-status men, unless you're like a king, unless you're Henry VIII, okay, you can't have multiple women on the go. You have to commit to one woman and basically remove yourself from the dating pool, right? And so it isn't possible for the really attractive men to sort of amass a lot of women. And so I've heard it described as sexual socialism, monogamous marriage, because it does sort of encourage like a equalizing effect.
One each.
Yeah. Whereas in a polygamous system, obviously that's completely permissible. And, in extreme circumstances, you'll have high status men having, 100 women or something like that in historical examples. And then low status men just have none. And it's quite an unstable, one of the downsides of a polygamous system. It is quite common, and it's probably to some extent our species norm. I think it's what people kind of do when left to their own devices. That's like the natural way we settle if there are no social restrictions. One downside of it is having a lot of unmarried, or like having a lot of sexless men is quite bad for social stability because they're very frustrated. They're angry, they don't have a lot to lose. One of the really interesting things about going back to testosterone, when men have children and get married, their testosterone levels drop. They become less aggressive. Like in the year after a baby's born, men commit less crime, they're less promiscuous. Like there's a real sort of...
They just have no sleep.
I'm sure that's part of it. But there is like, if you're directly involved in caring for your own child, you do, as a man, you do become less high tea. And that has a sort of taming effect, right? Or it's channeling male energies in a different direction, which at a societal scale can be really good in terms of having a peaceful, stable society. And polygamous societies do tend to be more unstable in that sense. There's more domestic violence in polygamous societies. There's more conflict within households. Like there are quite a lot of bad outcomes that you get from polygamous systems. So even though monogamy is maybe not the norm anthropologically, it does seem to be a good norm. And some of the most successful societies have adopted monogamy as their norm, and have been successful partly because of that.
If you are to have a daughter in the future, I know you've got a son already and you've got another boy on the way, but if you are to have a daughter in the future and that daughter comes up to you at, let's say, 18 years old and says, "Mum, I heard on that podcast you did ages ago, 20 years ago, that you said I shouldn't have sex with the guy I'm dating until engagement.
Yeah.
Mum, can you just confirm why? What would you say to your daughter?
There's a few reasons. One is because women in particular tend to get emotionally bonded from sex more than men do.
Do we know that? Because anecdotally, in the group chat, confirmed.
Yes.
But is there science to support that idea?
Yeah, I think that you can measure it in terms of things like oxytocin.
Okay.
And there's actually, I wrote about this in the book, there's this whole like horrible genre of journalistic articles basically advising women on how to have casual sex without being miserable. And sort of what can you do to like hack your brain so that you can have casual sex without feeling dreadful afterwards. This is like public acknowledgement that this is a thing. And one of the pieces of advice is things like take ecstasy while you're having sex because it will like dull your emotional bonding response, things like that, which I just find so dystopian. I'm like, well, you could just not.
Yeah.
Or, you don't have to like try and biohack your brain to endure something you don't really want to do. But anyway, women get more emotionally bonded from sex than men do. And then you do end up with this kind of asymmetry, which comes up in the group chat, right? Of like, she basically is more into him than he is into her. And if there's no commitment, not even any necessarily social acknowledgement of the relationship, it might be just friends with benefits or something, that can be really painful. So it's a good idea to basically, if you hold off on having sex, you hold off on having that effect. And it means you can make clear-eyed decisions. If you see red flags, you're more likely to respond to them properly if you're not like befuddled by oxytocin, basically. The other thing is it's just a really, really good demonstration of commitment. If you always risk getting pregnant. You always do, even if you're on modern contraception. There's always that risk. And do you want a man who is going to ditch you if that happens, basically? Like how can you find some guarantee that he's not going to do that? A diamond ring is a pretty good one, don't you think? There are other ways you could demonstrate it, but that's a really good one. And it's a kind of tried and tested one.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.